Mr. Ky, in 1964, you wanted to take the war north. Why did you do that? What did you hope to accomplish?
Well, because military speaking, I think that's the only way we could stop them. I mean, you could stop the invasion of the communists.
Can't just fight within South Vietnam.
There's no way. I remember during the Guam conference with President Johnson, I instructed Calvin Nguyen, the Chief of General Staff at that time, to give to the American delegation a complete briefing about our plan, In that, I asked the agreement of American government to support the idea having me as a volunteer to go north with 2 or 3 Vietnamese division. All what we asked them is to provide us with air support or, a naval supply.
But back in '64, when this question first came up, what was the reaction of the Americans?
I remember many conversations I had with Secretary Dindras, for example. I had the feeling that the American government always afraid that if we go north and the Chinese communists will, come south to rescue the Vietnamese communists. And,
what did you think of that? Would they have come?
Well, I remember at that time I told Mr. Dindras that that thing will not happen. I don't think the Chinese will come south to rescue the Vietnamese communists.
Why?
Well, because I don't think the Vietnamese communists will ask the Chinese to come south. And second, I think even at that time we knew that the Vietnamese communist leader are more or less side with the Russian. And that's something that the Chinese don't like. And you see, what happened today proves that I am right in my judgment.
But our goal was always independence for South Vietnam. Was yours the same?
I beg pardon?
The goal of the United States was always independence for South Vietnam.
Yes.
It wasn't to conquer the North. Was your goal the same?
Oh, yes. Yes.
But did you want to reunify with all of Vietnam?
Yes. Sure that every Vietnamese want to see Vietnam unify. But at that time, our first priority is to bring peace back to the whole Indochina. In the works to stop the communist invasion first. And then let the people of both South and North live in peace for a while. And then maybe later on, let the people decide by themselves.
But the best way to stop it was by heading north.
Yeah. In order to destroy the enemy capabilities to sustain invasion war.
You finally had a chance to go north in February of '65. You were in the lead plane of that reprisal attack at Chaplet.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what happened and how you felt about it?
Yeah, but it again is a very limited mission, using only air power. And but even for a limited mission, incursion into the North, it provides us a big excitement at that time. I was commander of the Air Force at that time, and I remember that for the first air mission, when we crossed the border, I had more, pilot volunteer than what we need for the mission.
It was good for morale to finally be heading north.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a lot of Buddhist unrest in 1964 from sort of August on. Was Kong stirring this up? What was he doing at that time? Well, why all the unrest?
Well, why the unrest? Because remember, the Buddhists raised to power not only 64, but back in 63, after the coup, against President Diem. And the Buddhists become a political force, strong and well organized. But then, I think the Buddhist leaders, they thought that they are the real power. So they began to ask, too much. Hang trying to play a smart politician. He tried to accommodate, not only the Buddhists, but all the other groups, other factions also. And that's the cause of the downfall of Hang, because there are so much groups, so much factions, so much differences that you couldn't please everyone and get the support from everyone.
Were you instrumental in trying to get him out?
I arranged the departure of Kang, but I never really wanted his departure. I arranged his departure only after he shows that he could not govern anymore. Remember at that time, coup and anti-coup happen every 2-3 weeks, every month in South Vietnam.
So you gave him a medal and sent him on his way?
Yeah, I think that's the best arrangement I can get for him. I like him, but because his instability, political instability. So the feeling among the senior, general officer at that time was against him.
Tell me about your relationship with Ambassador Taylor, in particular about the incident, I think it was December 1964, when he got you and some of the other generals and gave you a tongue lashing.
Well, when General Taylor was ambassador in Saigon, I was the junior officer, I think, 1-star general commanding of the Air Force. So actually, I didn't have too much, relations or conversation with Taylor. But we had met once, and I had the impression that he looked down, on us like a big brother, looking down the the young junior officer.
Tell us what happened when you first went into the American Embassy to see Taylor.
Well, I think that day the armed forces had decided to abolish the National High Council, a civilian body. So I think Ambassador Taylor was very, unhappy. So that morning we were all meet together at the headquarters of the General Chief Staff. And General Kang, after talking with Ambassador Taylor in the telephone, he said to us, that Taylor wants to meet with me, but I'm not going, so why don't you? He asked me. And General Thiel and Admiral Kang, I think, the commander of the Navy, and General T. So four of us, we went down the American embassy to see Ambassador Taylor. So when we first came in, in his office, he looked very, very, unhappy. He didn't even shake hands with us, just say, okay, sit down. So we sit down and listen to him. And he said, well, gentlemen, remember a few days ago I gave a dinner. And I told you that we want stability, we don't want any trouble, any changes. And now, see what happened. You abolished the National Council and so on. So he said something like, it's a waste, either waste of time or waste of food that he gave to us. But well, I understood that it was a waste of food. So I said to him, now listen, General, I don't think it's a waste, because I remember that the piece of steak that you gave to me, it's the best piece of steak I never had in my, whole life as a poor Vietnamese. So I really appreciate the food. It's not a waste. So he said, why you did that? Why you did? I said, well, why you did? Because we thought it's in our interest, the interest of Vietnam. Well, that's a whole, conversation, because he didn't convince us that we are doing wrong, or either we convince him that he's wrong and we are right.
How did you feel in June of 1965 when you finally became the Prime Minister? How did you feel then? Were you optimistic? Were you excited?
Frankly, remember that that day, because the fight between the civilian factors, at that time we had Chief of State and the Prime Minister, both a civilian. But they belong to two different political parties, So at the end, they couldn't govern, because the Chief of State, is against the Prime Minister. So I remember that night, about 11 o'clock, they called all of us, the Armed Forces Council, to the Prime Minister office. And they decide both, resign. and handed the power back to the military.